My name is Frank. I'm 73 years old. 3 years ago, at the age of 70, I sold my house in Naperville, Illinois, packed 2 suitcases, and moved to Chiang Rai, Thailand. My neighbors on Redwood Lane threw me a going-away party where every single one of them, and I mean every single one, took me aside at some point during the evening to tell me they thought I was making a terrible mistake. One of them, my neighbor across the street named Bill, actually said the words, "Frank, this is the dumbest thing I have ever seen a grown man do." 3 years later, Bill lives 4 blocks from me in Chiang Rai. And he is not the only one. If you are enjoying this so far, please hit subscribe. I put up a story like mine every week from folks who did what everybody said was impossible. It costs you nothing, and it helps another person find this. Now let me tell you what actually happened. I want to start with who I was before I moved, because the point of this story is not really about Thailand. It is about how wrong the people who love you can be about your own life, even when they mean well. And it is about the fact that sometimes the people who tell you you are crazy are the same people who will call you 6 months later and ask for your help doing the same thing. I grew up in a little town in central Illinois called Pontiac. My dad ran a small insurance office on the main square for 38 years. My mom worked at the elementary school as a secretary. I had one sister, Linda, who is still in Pontiac and who runs the same insurance office now with her son. I went to Illinois State University, graduated in 1974 with a business degree, and I got hired at Caterpillar in Peoria as a purchasing agent. I stayed with Caterpillar for 34 years. Not glamorous, very steady. I retired in 2008 with a pension that has kept me comfortable for 17 years now. I never married. I want to say that up front because it makes my story different from a lot of the ones I hear on YouTube. I had 2 long relationships in my 30s and 40s, both good women, both ended for reasons that were mostly my fault, and by the time I was 55, I had made a kind of quiet peace with the idea that I was going to be a bachelor. My sister Linda has 3 kids and 6 grandkids, and I've been the favorite uncle for 40 years, and that turned out to be enough for me. I bought the house on Redwood Lane in Naperville in 1998, a modest 3-bedroom brick ranch on a cul-de-sac, 9 houses on the street. I paid $240,000 for it. By the time I sold it in 2022, it was worth close to $620,000. I paid the mortgage off in 2015. I lived alone in that house for 24 years, and I loved it. I want to say that too. I did not leave because I hated my life. I left because I was ready for a different one. My neighbors on Redwood Lane were the reason I stayed as long as I did. That block was one of those neighborhoods that does not really exist anymore in most of America. 9 families who had been there for decades. We had a block party every June. We had a Christmas cookie exchange every December. When my next-door neighbor Marge had knee surgery in 2019, 6 of us took turns bringing her dinner for 3 weeks. When Bill across the street lost his wife Carol to a stroke in 2020, I sat with him on his front porch on a Saturday evening for 4 hours, and neither of us said very much. And it was one of the most important conversations of my life. I want you to hear that. The people who called me crazy were not strangers. They were my friends. They had earned the right to have opinions about my life. That is what makes this story worth telling. The idea of Thailand did not come to me from a stranger. It came from a guy I had worked with at Caterpillar for 18 years, a man named Doug Reinhardt. Doug retired 2 years before I did, in 2006. He moved to Chiang Rai in 2010 with his wife Marisa, who is Filipina originally, but had lived in the States for 30 years. Doug and I had stayed in touch on and off. Christmas cards. The occasional email. Then in early 2021, I got a long email from him. Marissa had passed away the year before from cancer. Doug was staying in Chiang Rai. He said he was okay. He said the community there had held him up during her illness and after, in a way that would not have happened in Illinois. He asked me if I would come out and visit him for a couple of weeks. He was lonely, he said. Not in a desperate way. In a way where an old friend from the plant would be good medicine. I want to be honest. I did not go right away. It was 2021. The pandemic was still complicated. I was 69 years old, and I had not been on an international flight since a business trip to Mexico in 1996. I told Doug I would come as soon as things settled down. I meant it when I said it. I also did not do anything about it for 8 months. What got me on the plane was Marge, my next-door neighbor. In February of 2022, Marge had a small stroke. Nothing catastrophic. She recovered fully. But it scared me. Marge was 72. Bill across the street had just turned 73. I was 70. I sat on my front porch one Saturday afternoon in early March, and I looked at my quiet street. And I thought, this is the shape of the rest of my life, and I love this shape. But I have never seen anything else. And if I am going to see anything else, it needs to be now, because in 5 years Marge might have another stroke, and I might have my own problem and the window will be closed. I emailed Doug that night. I said, Doug, book me a flight to Chiang Rai. I want to come for 3 weeks in May. He wrote back within 2 hours. He said, Frank, about time. I will pick you up at the airport in Chiang Mai and drive you up. Do not book anything else. You are staying with me. I told my neighbors at the block party that June, after I had gotten back. That is when the trouble started, because I had come back a different man than the one who had left 3 weeks earlier. And every single person on Redwood Lane could see it. I want to tell you what changed in me on that first trip to Chiang Rai, because it is the thing that made every one of my neighbors decide I had lost my mind. Chiang Rai is in the far north of Thailand, about 2 hours up the road from Chiang Mai. It is a smaller city, maybe 200,000 people in the main urban area, sitting in a valley surrounded by hills and rice fields. It is quieter than Chiang Mai. It is cooler than Bangkok. It is close to the Mekong River and to the borders of Laos and Myanmar. It has a large night market, 3 big hospitals, a small international airport, and one of the most famous temples in Thailand, the Wat Rong Khun, which is called the White Temple and looks like something out of a fantasy movie. Doug picked me up at Chiang Mai International Airport on a Thursday afternoon in May of 2022. He was standing in the arrivals hall in shorts and a Caterpillar polo shirt from 1998, which I recognized because I had one just like it in a drawer back in Naperville. He hugged me and he said, Frank, you made it. Let's go. He drove me up to Chiang Rai in his old Toyota pickup. 2 hours through the mountains. We passed rice fields, small villages, tea plantations, and I sat in the passenger seat with the window down and the warm wind on my face, and I thought, I have not been anywhere new in 20 years. Not really. And this is what new looks like. Doug's house was in a small neighborhood called Rap Wiang, about a 15-minute drive from the center of Chiang Rai. 2-bedroom, walled garden, a covered patio out back. Simple. Clean. Comfortable. He had a guest room made up for me with fresh sheets and a small pot of jasmine on the nightstand that his housekeeper Ning had put there. Ning came to clean the house twice a week. Doug had known her for 11 years. She had become family. She was the first person I met besides Doug, and she brought me a bowl of cow soy, a northern Thai curry noodle soup, on my first night before I had even unpacked. I want to walk you through the 3 weeks, because it is not what changed everything for me in one dramatic moment. It was the accumulation. Doug and I ate breakfast every morning at a small place 2 blocks from his house called Cabbages and Condoms, which is a real restaurant with a real name and a whole story behind it about a family planning charity. The breakfast was a Thai-style set with an omelet, rice, sausage, and coffee for the equivalent of $2.50. We went there every single morning of those 3 weeks. The owner, a woman in her 60s named Auntie Nid, learned my name on day 2, and by day 5 was setting my coffee down before I sat down. Doug drove me to the Wat Rong Khun on my first weekend. That is the White Temple I mentioned. It is a working Buddhist temple designed by a Thai artist named Chalermchai Kosit Pipat that looks like a wedding cake made of sugar and mirrors. There is a bridge you cross with sculpted hands reaching up out of the ground from below to represent human desire. I stood on that bridge, and I did not know what I was looking at, because I had never seen anything like it in my life. And I want to tell you plainly that it moved me more than I expected. I am not a religious man. I have not been to a church since my mother's funeral in 2011. But I stood on that bridge, and I felt something that was very close to what people mean when they say the word grace. Doug took me to Bangkok Hospital Chiang Rai on my second Monday. Not because anything was wrong, because he wanted me to see. He said, "Frank, every American who comes here needs to see what a hospital actually looks like." We walked in through the sliding glass doors of a lobby that looked like a nice hotel. Marble floors, a concierge in a blue uniform, a cafe. Doug had a routine checkup scheduled for that morning, and he wanted me to sit in on it. His cardiologist, a woman named Dr. Piaya, who had trained in Bangkok and done a fellowship at Johns Hopkins, welcomed me into the exam room without hesitation. She spent 40 minutes with Doug going through his last 12 months. She had ordered his blood work the week before and had it all in front of her. She talked to him about his sleep, his diet, his social life, his mood. She hugged him at the end of the appointment. Doug's bill for that visit, the consultation, the previous week's blood work, and a follow-up ultrasound she ordered for the afternoon was 3,200 baht, about $90. I sat in that lobby, and I thought about my own last cardiology appointment at Edward Hospital in Naperville. 9 minutes with the doctor, a bill for $440 after Medicare had covered its part. No hug. Doug took me to Bon Dam, the Black House Museum, on my second Wednesday. That is another Chiang Rai landmark, a compound of dark wooden buildings built by an artist named Thawan Dushani that houses one of the strangest and most powerful art collections I have ever walked through. Snakeskins, buffalo horns, wooden thrones, silver, bone. I spent 3 hours in there, and I could not tell you what any of it meant, but I could tell you that when I walked out into the sunlight, I felt like my whole idea of what art was had been widened by about 6 feet in every direction. Doug took me to the Sunday walking street market on my second Sunday. Half a mile of stalls closed off to traffic in the middle of downtown. Food, crafts, clothes, music, old Thai men playing bamboo instruments at intersections, young Thai women selling pad Thai from carts they had wheeled in from home. I ate my dinner walking. Chicken satay for the equivalent of $1, a grilled banana with sticky rice and coconut milk for 80 cents, a fresh coconut water served in the coconut with a straw for $1. I walked back to Doug's house that Sunday night and I said to him, "Doug, I need to ask you something." He said, "Ask." I said, "Are you happier here than you were in Peoria?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Frank, it is not that I'm happier. It is that I'm here in a way that I was not here in Peoria for the last 10 years of Maurice's life. I was a ghost in that house. I do not know how else to say it. I am not a ghost here. I do not know if that is the same as happier, but it is what I have." I said, "Doug, that is the answer I was afraid of." He said, "Why afraid?" I said, "Because it means I'm going to have to think about my own life differently. And I am 70, and I do not want to." He said, "Frank, 70 is the exact age to think about it differently. 65 is when you are still telling yourself you have time. 70 is when you know you do not." I flew home on a Wednesday in the last week of May. I sat on the plane for the 16 hours between Bangkok and Chicago, and I thought about my house on Redwood Lane. My neighbors. My routines. The block party in a month. The Christmas cookie exchange in 6 months. The life I had built and loved. And I thought about Auntie Nid setting down my coffee before I sat down. And Dr. Pia hugging Doug. And the walking street market on Sunday night. And Ning bringing me khao soi before I had unpacked. And I understood that I did not have to choose between the two lives. I could love Redwood Lane and still leave it. Loving something is not the same as being obligated to spend the rest of your life inside it. I landed at O'Hare on a Thursday morning. I drove home. I walked into my house on Redwood Lane. I stood in the front hallway with my suitcase, and I looked at the living room I had furnished 24 years earlier. And I said out loud to nobody, "Okay, I know what I am doing." The block party was on the second Saturday in June. 9 houses. About 30 people once you counted the adult kids who came home for it. I had brought Doug's peanut sauce recipe back with me, and I had made it that morning for the potluck. Auntie Nid had written it out for me by hand at Cabbages and Condoms on my last day, in careful English, and I had folded that piece of paper into my wallet and carried it home. Bill from across the street was standing at the grill with a beer in his hand when I walked over. He looked at me. He said, "Frank, you look different." I said, "Bill, do I?" He said, "Yeah, you look, I do not know. Younger." I said, "Bill, I have something to tell everybody. But I want to tell you first." He put his tongs down. He said, "Uh-oh." I said, "Bill, I'm going to sell the house. I'm moving to Chiang Rai." Bill stared at me for about 6 seconds. Then he set his beer down on the little table next to the grill. He turned so he was facing me square. He said, "Frank, that is the dumbest thing I have ever heard a grown man say." I said, "Bill, I understand why you think that." He said, "Frank, you are 70 years old. You have a paid-off house. You have a pension. You have us. What in God's name are you doing?" I said, "Bill, I am doing what I have to do. I need you to trust me on this." He said, "Frank, I am your friend. I love you. And I am telling you as a friend, do not do this." That was Bill. That was the first of 9 conversations I had that afternoon, each one variations on the same theme. Marge next door held both my hands and cried. Rich 3 houses down told me his brother had done something similar and had come back within a year, broke and heartbroken. Sandra and Tom at the end of the cul-de-sac took me aside and told me they were worried I was having a delayed grief reaction to my mother's death 11 years earlier, which I want to be clear, was not what was happening. By the end of that block party, 9 people I loved had told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. And I want to tell you the honest truth. I went home that night, sat on my couch in the dark, and for about an hour I thought maybe they were right. Then I thought about Doug on his patio in Chiang Rai saying, 70 is when you know you do not. And I said out loud to my empty living room, "Frank, you are doing this." I gave myself 6 months to do it right. I want to walk you through those 6 months. Because if you are sitting in a house you love in a neighborhood you love, and you are thinking about doing what I did, the shape of it matters. June. I put the house on the market. My realtor was a young woman named Amanda, who had grown up 2 streets over. She walked through my house on a Tuesday morning. She stopped in the living room. She said, "Frank, where are you going?" I said, "Amanda, Chiang Rai, Thailand." She said, "Frank, my aunt did this." Portugal. 3 years ago. She sends me a photo of her breakfast every Sunday morning. She is happier than she has been since my uncle passed. If you are doing this for real, I am going to sell your house fast, and I am going to sell it well. She priced it at $625,000. It sold in 11 days for $632,000. Cash offer from a young couple with 2 small kids who had been trying to get into the neighborhood for a year. I walked away, after everything, with $618,000. July. I did the visa. Thailand non-immigrant OA retirement visa, age 50 and over. Prove 800,000 baht in a Thai bank or a monthly income of 65,000 baht, or a combination. My Caterpillar pension plus Social Security ran me close to $5,200 a month. I qualified on income easily. I used Doug's visa agent, a woman in Chiang Rai named Kun Mali. She handled everything on the Thai side. My part was an FBI background check, a medical certificate, and proof of income. The whole thing cost about $1,300, including her fee. It took 9 weeks. August. I got rid of things. 24 years in one house. I had accumulated more than I realized. I made an inventory. I made choices. I kept 2 suitcases of clothes. I kept photos. My dad's old insurance license from Pontiac, a Cubs baseball my grandfather had caught at Wrigley Field in 1945, my mother's rosary, 3 Caterpillar service pins from my 34th year, and a small oil painting of a barn my sister Linda had painted in high school. Everything else went. My furniture, my books, my tools, my car, my kitchen. I gave a lot of it to Marge next door because her son and his wife were setting up a house in Wheaton. I gave my Craftsman tool chest to Bill across the street because Bill had wanted it for 6 years, and I wanted him to have it. I gave my snowblower to Rich 3 houses down. I sold my Buick Regal to a young mechanic in Naperville for $5,300. Linda drove up from Pontiac the last weekend. She sat in my empty living room and she cried, and then she wiped her face, and she said, "Frank, Mom would be so proud of you. She always said you were the one of us who would eventually get out and see the world. She said it about you at your college graduation." I said, "Linda, Mom never said that to me." She said, "Frank, mothers do not say things like that to sons. They say them to daughters about sons." I hugged her for a long time. The block party in September was my going-away party. All 9 houses. Bill had, over the summer, moved from "you are crazy" to "I still think you are crazy, but I love you." He had brought a big card that everybody had signed. Marge had made a scrapbook of photos from 24 years of block parties. Rich had bought me a Cubs hat with the year of my move stitched into the back. Sandra and Tom had bought me a leather journal, and inside the front cover Sandra had written, "Frank, we love you. Write it down. All of it. Come home if you have to. Do not come home if you do not have to." Bill made a toast. He stood in the middle of my empty living room, and he raised his beer, and he said, "To Frank Riley, who is either the bravest man on this street or the biggest fool this street has ever known, and I have known him for 24 years, and I still cannot tell you which one. But I love him, and I am going to miss him, and if he needs us, we will get on a plane. So help me God." Everybody laughed and cried. So did I. I flew out of O'Hare on the 2nd of October, 2022. Doug picked me up at Chiang Mai Airport the next day and drove me up to Chiang Rai in his old Toyota. He handed me the keys to the guest room and he said, "Frank, stay as long as you need. Take your time. We are in no rush." I stayed with Doug for 3 weeks while I found a house. Kun Mali's cousin was a rental agent named Kun Nong. She showed me 9 houses in 5 days. I settled on a 2-bedroom detached house in a small development called Swan Caillou, about a 10-minute drive from Doug's place, walled garden with a mango tree and 2 papaya trees, a small covered patio, aircon in the bedrooms only, ceiling fans everywhere else. Rent, 16,000 baht a month, about $450. The landlord was a young Thai woman named Kun Fa, 34, who had inherited the property from her grandmother. She met me at the house with the keys. She asked me 2 questions. Would I water the mango tree? And did I have any pets? I said yes to the mango tree and no to the pets. She smiled and said, "Then you are the right tenant. Welcome." I moved in on my 4th day. Doug came over with a small pot of curry Ning had made. Ning came over the next day with 2 plants for the patio and refused to leave until she was sure I had a working coffee maker. She looked at the small drip machine I had brought from Naperville, plugged it in, watched it work, and then she said in careful English, "Uncle Frank, good, now you are home. I want to walk you through my monthly costs because I promised you the numbers. Rent, 16,000 baht, $450. Electric, about 2,000 baht. $56. Water and Wi-Fi included in rent. Thai SIM with unlimited data, 300 baht, $8.50. Groceries at the local market and at Big C twice a month, about 5,000 baht, $140. Eating out, 4 or 5 times a week at small local places and once a week at a nicer restaurant, about 6,000 baht, $170. Scooter I bought used from a friend of Doug's for 22,000 baht, $620. Monthly gas about 350 baht, $10. Health insurance with Pacific Cross, about 72,000 baht a year, roughly $170 a month. Housekeeping. Ning's niece Phi comes twice a week to my house for the equivalent of $11 per visit, about 100 baht. Miscellaneous, haircuts, laundry, coffee shop coffee 3 or 4 mornings a week, occasional weekend trips, about 2,500 baht, $70. Total. About 34,000 baht a month, $960, some months a little more. Some months 800 and something. My income between pension and Social Security is close to $5,200 a month. I am banking over $4,000 a month. I have been banking it for almost 3 years. Plus the $618,000 from the house sale is in a moderate portfolio Doug's financial guy in Chicago manages, and it has grown almost 12% per year on average since I put it in. I am 73 years old, and I have never had this much money in my life. Not because I got lucky. Because I moved. I want to tell you about the moment I understood the neighbors had been wrong. It was March of 2023, 5 months into my new life. I got a phone call at 10 in the morning Chiang Rai time from Bill on Redwood Lane. That is 9 at night the day before in Illinois. Bill said, "Frank." I said, "Bill, are you okay?" He said, "Frank, Carol has been gone almost 3 years." I said, "I know, Bill." He said, "Frank, I have been sitting in this house for 3 years, and I am not doing well. I am not sleeping. I am drinking too much. Sandra and Tom are worried about me. Marge is worried about me. I am worried about me." I said, "Bill, what can I do?" He said, "Frank, can I come and see you? Not to move. To see you. 2 weeks. I want to see what you're doing over there." I said, "Bill, get on the plane. I will pick you up in Chiang Mai." Bill flew out 3 weeks later. I picked him up at Chiang Mai Airport in a rental car. He walked out of the arrivals hall in a Cubs jacket and jeans, and I hugged him in the parking lot, and he said into my shoulder, "Frank, I am sorry I called you crazy." I said, "Bill, do not be sorry. Wait until you see it." Bill stayed with me for 18 days on that first trip, and I want to walk you through what happened because it is the thing that started a chain reaction on Redwood Lane that nobody, including me, saw coming. I put Bill in my guest room. I gave him a set of keys. I told him to use the scooter if he wanted, though I doubted he would because Bill has never been on 2 wheels in his life. I told him the Wi-Fi password, and I showed him the coffee machine, and I told him I was going to keep my own routines, and he could come along or he could not, and no feelings would be hurt either way. The first 3 days he slept. I mean that literally. He was jet-lagged. He was exhausted from 3 years of being a widower who was not sleeping properly. He slept 12 hours the first night, 10 the second, and 9 the third. On the morning of day 4, he came out to the patio at 7 in the morning, where I was drinking coffee, and he sat down next to me, and he said, "Frank, I have not slept like this in 3 years." I said, "Bill, that is what happens here." He said, "That is what happens where?" I said, "Bill, in a place where nobody is expecting anything from you, and the temperature at night is 72 degrees, and there is no news cycle on your television at 11 at night, making your blood pressure spike before you go to bed. He sat with that. He drank his coffee. He said, "Frank, show me your life." So I did. I showed him the whole thing. I took him to Cabbages and Condoms for breakfast. Auntie Nid looked at him, looked at me, and said, "Uncle Frank has a brother?" I said, "No, Auntie. My neighbor from America. His name is Bill." Auntie Nid put both her hands together in a Y, and she said, "Welcome, Uncle Bill. You want same as Uncle Frank?" Bill nodded. She brought him the same set breakfast I have every morning. He ate all of it. He said, "Frank, $2.50. I said, $2.50. He said, "Frank, my breakfast at Egg Harbor in Naperville last Tuesday was $18 before tip." I took him to the Sunday walking street market that first weekend. He walked the whole half mile. He ate satay. He ate mango sticky rice. He watched 3 old Thai men play bamboo instruments at a corner, and he stood there for 20 minutes and did not move. I took him to Doug's house for dinner on the second Tuesday. Ning made a Thai chicken curry that Doug and Bill and I ate on the patio at sunset. Doug and Bill had never met, but they had heard about each other from me for 20 years, and they took to each other the way men who have both worked at Caterpillar for their whole careers take to each other, which is immediately. Doug talked to Bill for a long time that night after dinner. I want to be careful about what I share here, because Bill has given me permission to tell this story publicly. But there are private pieces I'm going to keep private. What I will say is that Doug and Bill had both lost their wives within 11 months of each other. Doug's Marissa had been sick for 2 years before she went. Carol had gone from a stroke in 6 hours. 2 different shapes of losing a wife. But the loss underneath was the same, and Doug knew exactly what shape the last 3 years had been for Bill, because he had been there himself. Doug said something to Bill that night on his patio that I have thought about 100 times since. He said, "Bill, grief does not need geography. But grief in a house where every corner is a photo of the person who is not there anymore is a different kind of grief than grief in a place where you get to build something new. That is not running away. That is respecting the size of what you lost by not asking yourself to live inside it forever." Bill sat with that for a long time. Then he said, "Doug, is that what you did?" Doug said, "That is what I did. It is not a fix. Marissa is still gone. I am still a widower. But I am a widower who wakes up in the morning and eats breakfast with a woman named Auntie Nid who is glad to see me. That is not nothing." We drove Bill up to the White Temple on the second Saturday. Bill stood on that bridge with the hands reaching up out of the ground, and he was quiet for a long time. I have known Bill for 24 years, and I know what his quiet means. It means he is thinking about Carol. I did not interrupt him. I stood off to the side and let him have it. When he was done, he walked over to me and he said, "Frank, she would have loved this." I said, "Bill, I know." He said, "Frank, why did we never take a trip like this? Not to Thailand, anywhere. Carol asked me for 20 years to take her somewhere. I always said next year. Next year. Then she was gone. I said, 'Bill, come on. Let us walk.' We walked back to the car in silence. The last week Bill was with me, he started asking questions. Real questions. Not tourist questions. What was the visa process like? What did the hospitals actually cost? Could a widower move here on his own without knowing anyone? Could he live in a house near mine? Was there rentable inventory in Suan Caillou? Were there other Americans in the neighborhood? How did I handle mail from the States? What did I do about my Social Security and my Medicare? How did the taxes work? I answered every question. I told him the truth about all of it, the easy parts and the hard parts. I told him about my own hard days. The morning in December, I had a stomach bug, and I lay in bed for 6 hours feeling sorry for myself and homesick for the first time. The afternoon in February, when I could not figure out how to get a specific medication I had been on for 8 years, and I had to call Doug 3 times to help me sort it out. The Sunday in January, when I saw a photo on Facebook of the Redwood Lane block Christmas cookie exchange, and I sat on my patio, and I felt genuinely sad about missing it. Bill listened to all of it. He said, "Frank, that is the honest version." I said, "Bill, it is the only version worth telling. Everything else is a YouTube fantasy." He flew home on a Sunday. I drove him back down to Chiang Mai, and I hugged him at the departure gate. He said, "Frank, give me 6 months. I need to think. I need to sell the house. I need to figure out what to do with Carol's things. I need to talk to my sons. But give me 6 months." I said, "Bill, take a year if you need it. This place is not going anywhere." He flew home. 6 months later, in October of 2023, exactly 1 year after I had landed in Thailand, Bill sold the Redwood Lane house across the street from mine, packed 2 suitcases, and moved to Chiang Rai. He rented a small house 4 blocks from mine in Suan Kaiu. Kun Pha, my landlord, had a cousin who owned a similar property and set him up. 15,000 baht a month. About $420, 100 meters from Auntie Need's breakfast spot. I want to tell you what happened after Bill moved, because it is where this story stops being about me and starts being about the neighborhood. 3 months after Bill arrived, Rich from 3 houses down called me. Rich was 71. He had retired from a career in commercial real estate. His wife Linda had passed away in 2015, and he had been a widower for 8 years. He had been to my going-away party. He had told me at that party that his brother had moved abroad and come back, broke and heartbroken. He had been convinced I was going to end the same way. Rich said, "Frank, I've been talking to Bill on the phone every week. He sounds like a different man." I said, "Rich, he is a different man." He said, "Frank, I am 8 years into being alone in a house that Linda decorated. I am tired. I am tired of the winters. I am tired of the taxes. I am tired of the neighbors talking about my dog like she is my whole personality. And I love that dog, but I am not just a dog. Frank, I am coming to visit. Not to move, to visit." Rich flew out in March of 2024. He stayed with Bill because Bill's guest room was open, and I had another guest coming the next week, which was Sandra from the end of the cul-de-sac. Sandra had not lost anybody. Sandra was different. Sandra was 69 and married to Tom, and both of them were healthy. Sandra had watched me leave, watched Bill leave, watched Rich start to talk about it. And Sandra had called me in February and said, "Frank, I am not moving anywhere, but Tom and I are going to come see it, because I have been watching this, and I am not going to be the last one on Redwood Lane who has not seen it. I want to know what everybody keeps talking about." Sandra and Tom stayed with me for 2 weeks in April of 2024. They rented a car. They went to the White Temple. They went to the Sunday Walking Street Market. They went with me to my Wednesday dinner at Doug and Bill's, which by then had become a standing weekly thing. Sandra sat at that table with 5 Americans, plus Ning, plus Auntie Need, who had joined us for the first time that night, and she looked around the table. And later she said to me privately, "Frank, I have not seen you laugh like this since the 90s. I said, "Sandra, I know." Rich moved to Chiang Rai in November of 2024. He rented a house in Suan Kaiu, 3 blocks from me and 1 block from Bill. Kun Pha's cousin found him the place. 14,500 baht a month, about $410. Sandra and Tom have not moved. Yet. But Sandra told me on our video call last month that she has started looking at flights for a second trip in the spring, and Tom has started asking his financial advisor real questions. and they are talking about it seriously for the first time in their marriage. I want to step back before this section and tell you what has changed in me in 3 years. Because the numbers and the neighbors and the visits are the plot. But there is a whole other story that is quieter, and I think it is the one that matters most. I want to start with my body, because that is where I feel it most. I am 73 years old, and I am in better physical shape than I was at 65. I have lost 28 pounds since I moved. Not because I dieted, because I walk everywhere. Because I eat rice and vegetables and grilled fish instead of the frozen pizza and Portillo's Italian beef I was living on in Naperville. Because my grocery store is a market where nothing is processed and nothing is packaged. Because when I want dessert, I get a mango sliced fresh from a stand for the equivalent of $1, and that is dessert. My blood pressure has come down 22 points. Dr. Pia at Bangkok Hospital Chiang Rai, who I share with Doug and now with Bill, told me at my last checkup in September that my numbers were better than most of her 60-year-old patients. She said, and I am quoting her here, "Uncle Frank, you are going to live to 95, and I am going to be very tired of you by then." I laughed for a long time at that. My sleep is different. I sleep 8 hours most nights. I used to sleep 5.5 in Naperville, and I had convinced myself that was just what old men did. That is not what old men do. That is what stressed men do. And I did not know I was stressed until I stopped being stressed. I want to tell you about my mind, because that has changed too. In Naperville, I had noticed in my late 60s that I was getting slower with names, slower with dates. I would walk into a room and forget why I had come in. I had chalked it up to age, and I had made peace with it. Since I moved to Chiang Rai, that has almost entirely stopped. I do not know if it is the walking, the sleep, the sun, the social contact, the fact that I have to think a little harder every day because I am in a country where I have to notice things. Probably all of it. But my memory at 73 is sharper than my memory at 68. I want to tell you about my friendships, because this is the piece that surprised me most. I did not think at 70 I was going to make new close friends. I thought I was going to keep the friends I had and slowly lose them as we all got older. Instead, I have made 3 new close friends in 3 years. And I have not lost the old ones. Doug, who I already had, has become my closest friend in the world because we live 12 minutes apart and we see each other 3 times a week instead of exchanging Christmas cards. Bill, who I have known for 24 years, has become closer to me since we both moved here than he ever was in Naperville. Because now we are 2 widowed and single men in our 70s figuring out a new country together instead of 2 neighbors waving at each other from our driveways. And I have made a new friend named Som Chai. He is Thai. He is 68. He runs a small motorcycle repair shop 2 streets from my house. I met him because I brought my scooter in for a tune-up in my first month. His English is decent, my Thai is bad, but we have found a way to talk. He has taught me more about Chiang Rai than any guidebook could. He has taken me to a temple in the hills outside the city that no tourist knows about, where his mother was cremated in 2018. He has invited me to his family's Songkran celebration, which is the Thai New Year, 3 years in a row. His grandchildren call me Uncle Frank. I have been in Chiang Rai for 3 years, and I have a Thai family, and I did not go looking for that. It happened because I sat in the same coffee shop, and I said good morning to Somchai when he walked in for his coffee, and eventually he said good morning back. And eventually we had a conversation. And eventually he invited me over. I want to tell you about the money one more time because I promised. 3 years in. My monthly cost is $980 average, occasionally up to $1,100 if I travel or have a big month. My income is about $5,200 a month. I have banked over $148,000 in 3 years on top of everything else. My house money in the moderate portfolio is now worth close to $780,000. My total liquid net worth at 73 is over $920,000. I am not telling you this to brag. I am telling you this because I want you to understand what happens when you move to a country where the numbers work in your favor. You do not just have enough, you have too much, and you get to decide what to do with too much for the first time in your life. Here is what I have decided to do with too much. I have set up a small scholarship at the local Thai high school in Ra Puyang. Doug knew the principal. I put $20,000 into an endowment that pays for 1 full year of high school for 2 Thai students per year forever. The school named it the Riley Reinhardt Scholarship because Doug matched my contribution the next month. I fly Linda and her husband Bob out here once a year. They have come twice now. They love it. Linda says my mother would have cried at some of the temples. I have paid for 2 of my great nieces to visit me. My youngest niece, Emily, came in the spring of 2024 with her college roommate. They stayed 3 weeks. Emily still emails me photos every couple of months. I fly back to the States twice a year, once for Christmas at Linda's in Pontiac, once in the summer for a week in Chicago to see Rich's kids and Sandra and Tom on Redwood Lane. Sandra puts me up in her guest room. I have started giving Bill a hard time about how long it took him to come. Bill is doing well here. I want to tell you that plainly because I know some of you are wondering. He has a routine. He walks. He eats at Auntie Need's. He has started dating a widow from Manchester, England, named Anne, who has been in Chiang Rai for 6 years. She is 68. They are careful with each other. Neither of them is trying to replace anybody. But they are happy in a way I did not know Bill could be happy again. He called me last month and he said, "Frank, I am not going to marry Anne. I do not need to, but I love her, and I did not think I was going to love anybody again." I said, "Bill, I am glad." He said, "Frank, do you remember what I said to you at the block party in June of 2022? I said, "Bill, I remember every word." He said, "Frank, I was wrong. I want to say it plainly. I was wrong. You were not crazy. You were early. And I'm sorry it took me a year of crying alone in Carol's kitchen to figure it out." I said, "Bill, you are not late. You are here. That is the only thing that matters." Rich is doing well, too. Different from Bill. Rich has thrown himself into learning Thai in a way I have not, and after 14 months he can hold a real conversation with a taxi driver, which is more than I can do after 3 years. Rich has also started a small business, a print-on-demand shop for expat English speakers who want printed materials, business cards, tourism flyers, small marketing pieces for their own little enterprises. He runs it out of his 2nd bedroom. He is making about $1,000 a month at it, and he loves the work. He says he loves the work more than any real estate deal he ever closed in Chicago, because a Thai wedding invitation matters to the couple in a way a strip mall lease did not. I want to tell you about the last block party I went to in Naperville, which was in June of this year. I was back in Chicago for my summer visit. Sandra had put me up. She said, "Frank, the block party is Saturday. You have to come." I said, "Sandra, I do not live on Redwood Lane anymore." She said, "Frank, once a Redwood Lane, always a Redwood Lane. Come." I went. I stood in Sandra's front yard with a beer in my hand. There were still 9 houses on the block, but 3 of them had turned over. My old house was owned by the young couple with the 2 little kids. And the little kids were 7 and 5 now. And they were running around the front yard chasing each other with squirt guns. Bill's house had been sold to a family from India, whose father had introduced himself to me at the potluck and told me his own father had retired to Goa, and he understood exactly what Bill had done, and he thought it was wonderful. Rich's house had been sold to a widow in her 60s named Ellen, who had moved down from Wisconsin. Marge had been at the party but had left early to lie down. I stood there in that front yard at 68 degrees on an Illinois June evening, and I looked at my old street, and I felt no pull to move back. None. Not because I did not love it. I did. Still do. But loving a place is not the same as belonging to it anymore. That block belongs to those new families now. It should. That is the whole point of neighborhoods. They renew. Ellen, the widow from Wisconsin, came over to me during the party. She had heard my whole story from Sandra. She said, "Frank, do you mind if I ask you something?" I said, "Not at all." She said, "Frank, I am 64. I have been a widow for 4 years. My kids are grown. I have this house. And I have started to notice that I have no idea what the rest of my life is for. And Sandra says you did something about that." I said, "Ellen, I did. And I would be happy to tell you about it." I gave her my email. She emailed me 2 weeks after I got back to Chiang Rai. We have been corresponding once a week since. She is flying out to visit in February. I want to close by telling you what a normal day looks like now, 3 years in. Not the highlights. The normal. Because I know how many of you are sitting somewhere in the Midwest right now trying to picture your own version. And I want you to see the shape of mine clearly. I woke up this morning at 6:10. The light was already coming through the window. I lay there for a minute listening. A rooster somewhere down the street. There is always a rooster somewhere in Suan Cayo, and I have made my peace with the roosters. I got up. My knee was a little stiff because it had rained last night, but nothing bad. I put water on for coffee. I stood at my kitchen window, and I watched Kun Fa's uncle across the way come out of his house with a small bucket to water his flowers. He is 77, and he waters those flowers every morning at 6:15. He looked over. I raised my hand. He raised his. Full conversation. I sat on my patio and I drank my coffee. Somchai's oldest grandson, who is 9, walked past on his way to school and waved at me through the gate. I waved back. He calls me Uncle Frank in English because his grandfather taught him to. At 7, I walked to Cabbages and Condoms. Bill was already there. He is there most mornings now. He beats me by 15 minutes because Anne likes him out of the house early so she can do her yoga. Auntie Nid saw me come in and set down my coffee. She said, "Uncle Frank, late again." I said, "Auntie, 7 o'clock, same as always." She said, "Late, sit." I sat. Bill grinned at me across the table. He said, "Frank, she's been calling me late for 6 months, and I always get here first." I said, "Bill, that is because Anne is smarter than you." He said, "Frank, that is the whole truth." We ate breakfast, $2.50 each. We talked about the neighborhood back in Naperville. Sandra had sent Bill a photo the night before of the block party planning committee, which she is now chair of. Bill and I both said we would send some money for the fireworks fund. I walked back to my house. I passed Doug's Toyota parked outside Somchai's shop. Doug was in there getting his oil changed. I stuck my head in and waved. He said, "Frank, Wednesday dinner at my place. Ning is cooking. Bring the peanut sauce ingredients." I said I would. I read on the patio for an hour. A biography of Truman that Rich had lent me. Around 10, I put on my helmet and rode the scooter to the Suan Cayo market. The lady on the fruit stand had set aside a bag of mangoes for me. She said, "Uncle, good ones." I paid her 60 baht, about $1.70. I stopped at Rich's on the way home. His print shop was open. He was doing a rush order of business cards for a Canadian expat who was starting a language school. I sat in his second bedroom for 20 minutes and watched him work and drank a glass of water. He said, "Frank, Ellen emailed. She has booked her flight. February 18th? I said, "Rich, Sandra is going to lose her mind when Ellen actually gets here." He said, "Frank, Sandra is already halfway packed, and she does not know it." I rode home. I made lunch, rice, grilled chicken, papaya salad Ning had sent home with me on Monday. I ate on the patio. I read some more. At 3, I had a video call with Linda in Pontiac. She showed me the new grandchild, my great-niece Ruby, born 8 weeks ago, who is Emily's baby. Ruby yawned at the camera and I said, "Sawadee ka" to her in a baby voice, and Emily laughed for a solid minute. At 5, I walked to the small Wat 2 streets from my house. I do not go to worship, I go to sit. There is a stone bench under a Bodhi tree in the temple garden, and I sit on it for 30 or 40 minutes most evenings before dinner. The monks nod at me. I nod back. That is our whole thing. At 6, I went to Doug's for dinner because it was Wednesday, and Wednesday is Doug's. Bill and Ann came. Rich came. Ning had made a fish curry. We ate on Doug's patio. We drank 1 beer each. Ann told a long story about a customer at the yoga studio who had put her foot through a mat. Doug and Bill and Rich and I all told the story of the first day I moved to Chiang Rai, which we tell every few months and which gets slightly funnier each time. Ning brought out mango sticky rice. I walked home at 9. That is a day. That is 52 weeks a year of those, with variation. Some weeks I travel. Some weeks I have a guest. Most weeks look like this one. I want to say the last things before we finish. If you are watching this, and you are a man my age or close to it, sitting in a house you have paid off in a suburb somewhere, with a pension, and a good street, and neighbors who love you, but nothing new happening ever, I want to speak to you specifically. Not to the people who are just curious about Thailand. To you. I know exactly what you are doing. I know because I did it for a decade. You are mowing the lawn on Saturday morning. You are watching the game on Sunday. You are meeting the same 3 guys at the same diner every Tuesday for breakfast. You are telling yourself that this is a good life, and you have earned this, and you should be grateful. And you are grateful. That is not the problem. The problem is that grateful and finished are not the same thing. And somewhere around 70, you start to feel the difference in your bones. I want you to hear me. At 70, you are not finished. There are options nobody has told you about because nobody on your street has done them yet. That does not mean they are not real. It means you are the one who gets to go first. Somebody has to be Frank on Redwood Lane. Somebody has to be the one whose block party toast is about being either the bravest or the biggest fool anybody has ever known. That is not a bad thing to be. That is what a neighborhood needs. Somebody has to leave first so the rest of them can see it is possible. You are allowed to leave. That is the sentence I want you to sit with. You are allowed to leave. At 65, at 70, at 75. You are allowed to sell a house you have loved for 24 years and get on a plane and see what the rest of your life could look like somewhere the numbers work and where the woman at the breakfast place calls you uncle by the second morning. You will not do it alone. I did not. Doug picked me up at the airport. Kunfa rented me a house because I said yes to the mango tree. Ning brought me plants. Somchai fixed my scooter and became my Thai family. Auntie Need learned my order. Bill came after me. Rich came after Bill. Ellen is coming in February. That is what happens. You go, and then other people go. I want to mention one thing before I sign off. There is a book called The Honest Move that walks through the real numbers on doing what I did. Cities compared side by side. The visa systems in Thailand, Portugal, the Philippines, Malaysia, Mexico, Ecuador. How the healthcare actually works. The traps that catch people in the first year abroad. I did not have it. I put it together the hard way through Doug and through months of research. If you are seriously thinking about a move like this, it will save you weeks of stumbling. There is a link in the description. No pressure. I just wish somebody had handed it to me at the block party in June of 2022. If this story meant something to you, If it reached you where you are sitting right now in your kitchen, with your paid-off house and your quiet street and your Sunday newspaper, I would appreciate it if you would hit the like button and subscribe. I put a story like this up every week from folks who did what everybody said was impossible. My name is Frank Riley. I am 73 years old. I worked at Caterpillar in Peoria for 34 years. I lived on Redwood Lane in Naperville for 24 years in a house I loved, with 9 neighbors who loved me. My old friend Doug Reinhardt emailed me from Chiang Rai in 2021 and asked me to come visit him. My neighbor Marge had a small stroke in February of 2022. I sat on my front porch that afternoon and I understood that the window was closing. I flew to Chiang Rai in May. I moved in October. My neighbors threw me a going-away party, and every single one of them told me I was making a terrible mistake. 3 years later, Bill lives 4 blocks from me. Rich lives 3 blocks from me. Sandra and Tom have booked their second trip. Ellen from Wisconsin has booked her first. My old friend Doug is my closest friend in the world. I have a Thai family through a man named Som Chai. I have a woman named Auntie Nid who calls me late every morning. I eat mangoes for $1. I sit on a stone bench under a Bodhi tree at 5 o'clock. The people who called me crazy were not stupid. They were not wrong to worry. They were early in their own thinking. And I was early in mine. And they caught up because they loved me. And I'd done something first that they had needed somebody to do. If you have neighbors who love you, and a street you love, and a house you love, and a life that has gone as small as mine had, I want you to consider being the first one on your block. Somebody has to be. It might as well be you. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself. I will see you next week.